It is Tuesday, the 17th of June. I'm Jamie Fitzpatrick, and this is The Signal. If you've got plants, you've probably got questions, and we're here with answers, or at least some good, reliable advice. It is gardening day here on the show. Call us or send us an email, and let us help your garden grow. On hand in the studio today, a pair of guests who keep the MUN Botanical Garden flourishing. Tim Walsh has been on the show on many an occasion before. Welcome back.
Oh, it's great to be here, Jamie.
And making his first appearance, Josh, I want to make sure I get your name right. Is it Josh Elyk?
Elyk.
Josh Elyk. Thank you for that correction. Josh Elyk. Josh, it's your first time on the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your association with the Botanical Garden.
Well, I've been working at the Botanical Garden since about August, and I'm working there as part of a new tree nursery under the 2 Billion Trees project. And I went to school for horticulture and landscape technology at Nova Scotia Community College. And I've worked in horticulture since then. I've worked in a few nurseries, and I was the manager of the integrated pest management department at a cannabis grow facility called Atlantic Cultivation for a couple of years too.
Okay, and you're ready for anything that might come your way in the next hour?
We'll see. I think so.
Be careful how you answer that, John.
Yeah.
We will see. Okay. I should remind people, if you have a question for our resident experts on gardening, the number to call is 709-722-7111. You can also send a text to 709-327-8206, or you can send us an email to signal@cbc.ca. But we do like to get people on the line in case there's follow-up questions or other points that need clarification. So to ask a question directly about what's happening in your garden, the number is 709-722-7111. So we had an email that came in advance, in fact. This is from Marie. I showed you guys the picture earlier. What it says is, why are these lilacs only growing at the top of the tree? And what can I do to assure a fuller tree? It's about 10 years old. It's the first time it has bloomed. But again, as the photo shows, only at the very top are the lilacs turning up. From the photo and from that question, well, Josh, we'll start with you. You're the new guy. Do you have any notions what's going on there?
There's a couple of things I see right away. It's a little shady there, so anything you're trying to get to flower, you want lots of sunlight. But for fullness of the tree, it is actually lots of branches. It is branching out pretty nicely, but you can always top your tree, which means the very tip of the top of the growth you can remove, and it'll start to branch out the shrub actually a bit more, or the tree or whatever plant you're trying to grow. And another thing I see in the picture is that the grass and the ground around the lilac, it looks pretty compacted. It's just regular ground. You can always loosen that up and try to feed the lilac a little bit. Just use a garden fork and dig into the soil, loosen around the roots. Don't dig anything out, and then just top dress with some compost, and that'll help with growth as well. But if it's only 10 years old, it's still not that old of a tree, so it may just not be mature enough in the conditions. Like some places, lilac might grow faster and get to maturity faster, but right there, it might be growing a little bit slower and just taking longer to get to that full mature size to be able to flower the way you want.
Any thoughts you want to add, Tim?
Yeah, I think that's a textbook answer, Josh. Well done for your first time. But yeah, I 10 years is not necessarily a great indicator for us in that situation because, as Josh said, 10 years in another tree in perfect conditions, maybe it would have been bigger. So I guess the person shouldn't expect it to be a super tall lilac after 10 years, considering some of the other stresses that it's up against in terms of the low light and the compaction and that sort of thing. But yeah, all good stuff. Sometimes lilacs are one of those things that have been in Newfoundland gardens forever, right? It's like that quintessential. It's your grandmother's flowering plant, right? Everybody knows it and remembers it. And sometimes we forget out some of the common things that plants need, because lilacs, we think, well, they can just do it because they do it by themselves out in the middle of meadows where there hasn't been anybody living forever. But you take a plant and you put it in a built environment like our landscape, and like what we don't know about the picture is what's under the grass, for instance. If that was a subdivision that was built and the lawn was made by the subsoil that was used to create the foundation of the house, that means that there's not very much soil there. And it could be that it's really struggling in that really compact soil. And there's really not much you can do about that now other than what Josh has already suggested, top dressing, and that will actually give it some nutrition from the top down and loosening up the soil. And what Josh means by that is not actually getting in there and turning the soil, but just with a garden fork, just pushing, like standing on it and driving it into the ground.
Stabbing at it.
Yeah, stabbing at it. Exactly. You're loosening up the soil around, and that allows them that mulch to, as it degrades, to go down into those holes, and it'll feed the roots a lot better.
Okay.
Yeah.
As I say, that email came in advance of the show, so I hope Marie is listening. She seemed like she was anxious for that answer about the lilac. First caller we have on the line today is John in St. John's. Thanks for joining us. What's your question for the guys?
Yeah, hi, Jamie. It's going to be a good show again today. It got to be a good show because the solstice is coming June 21st, right?
That's right.
True enough.
It's our last chance, right, before the solstice. And my question is I plant mostly beet and carrot, and when the beet and carrot gets up about 2 inches, I got a vine on the side of my fence that I just can't get rid of it, and it's coming through the fence, and it tangles up with the beet and carrot, and when you try to remove it, it pulls up the little short carrot and beet. So I don't know what to do about it. I don't know whether to, because right now I got it all dug up and it don't look too bad, but it comes on strong again, and it's really twisty and it's fairly long, right? So I don't know what is it, and I'm not sure if you let it go long enough. I think there might be a small flower come on it. I'm not sure. Okay, go ahead. So I don't know how to get rid of it. I can't. So it's almost like I'm working in vain, right?
Is the vine like a perennial woody type vine, or is it like a bunch of little vines that come up out of the soil?
It's just like it's just a small, really greeny vine, and it wraps around everything. So it's about the size of your finger, and in your finger there's probably 8 to 10. What would you call it? Threads or whatever you call it. You know what I mean?
It sounds like bindweed, which is related to morning glory. It's an Ipomia. And it's an annual that seeds into the soil. So the best thing to do is in the fall, remove as much of the vine as you can before it actually lays its seeds out. But in the spring, when you're pulling it out, there is a way to weed it without pulling your plants out of the ground. You have to pull the bindweed from the bottom so the root comes out of the soil. And then if you grab the very top of the vine and gently pull, it'll sometimes unravel up your bean plant, so it doesn't actually pull your bean plant out of the ground. So again, you're just like pulling the root out of the soil, and then gently the top of that vine that's wrapped around your plant, you start to unwrap it around your plant and pull upwards, and it'll come off your plant without killing it. It is tedious. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's very tedious.
Yeah, so I mean, Coach, that's exactly the word. It's tedious with almost every one that you got planted. You got to do that every one, and you become disheartening unless you continue to have shows like this.
That's right. Well, John, it is an aggressive weed. There's no doubt about that. And it's commonly called bindweed because of what it does. It literally binds and winds around whatever it can touch. It has that. Whenever the tip of that growing stem touches, there's a reaction that happens in the plant, and it encourages it to kind of curl. And what that does is it encourages that new growth to curl around and around and around. And you see it a lot, especially in older parts of St. John's and other areas. You see it on chain link fences and grown up areas that are not being tended anymore. But as Josh said, the only way to do it is to kind of get rid of it. Fall is great, but if you have it there now, you really have to get rid of it, because if you're going to if you want to grow these beets and other plants, you can't have this plant competing with it. So literally just cut it off as much as you can, and whenever you see it trying to get back up again, cut it off again, and don't actually let it get to any measurable size at all. So it just means that first little bit of work is going to be a little bit harder, because you have to make sure you get it, and as Josh said, take up as much of the root as possible. But then just keep an eye on it, and every time you're out checking on your vegetables, if you see a bit of it there, just yank it out of there.
And around your garden too, like anywhere near your garden. So that's what was happening to me. I was pulling it out of my garden, but then downwind, there was a big patch of it going to flower, going to seed, and blowing the seeds back in the garden every year.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for the call, John. Next up, we have Donna, who's on the line from St. John's as well. Hello.
Good afternoon, everybody. I look so forward to your Tuesday programs, and others too, of course. And I certainly can identify with poor John with his bindweed, because I've been battling goatweed for 15 years and finally gave up this year in a huge perennial garden and had professionals come in and dig it all out and tarp it and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So I certainly know how disheartening weeding can be. But that's not why I called. So, number one, I have a year-old flowering dogwood. I'm going to say it's 4 feet tall, extremely healthy, and no buds on it this year. So I'm brokenhearted about that.
Okay. Did you say dogwood?
A flowering dogwood.
Flowering dogwood, yeah. And so when you planted it, how long have you had it in?
It's been in a year.
Okay, and you had some flowers last year.
Yes.
So last year's flowers would have been, more than likely, they would have come on the strength of the nursery care that it had before you got it. So
obviously,
yeah. So the nurseries are growing these plants and getting them ready to distribute out to their wholesalers, who eventually sell them to customers. And and nurseries feed plants well, and they give them everything they need basically in order to get them looking their best for sale. And so yours would have kind of been flying on that on that trip there, and as a result, got some really good flowers as a result of that. Sometimes, though, however, when you get a plant for that first time, there's sometimes a bit of a settling in process where. Last year, after it flowered, then it started to move its roots out into the soil, and it's all about kind of establishing itself, or almost in a sense reestablishing itself in this new home. And sometimes that takes a bit of energy in terms of that the plant needs in order to do that, and it's at a loss to the flowers in the following year, because the energy went into like establishing it and kind of getting it started.
Yes.
But of course, it's a flowering plant. So the other thing is, then it's all about, well, what does it need? And obviously it needs, some good nutritious soil. So I would like to I think you sound, Donna, like you're a gardener. So I'm assuming that that didn't go in gravelly soil. I'm guessing that went in some decent soil.
It certainly did not, sir. It went in prime soil and compost and everything.
Yeah. So other than applying some fertilizer as well. On there.
And was that, I just always use 6-12-12 on pretty well everything in my garden, vegetables and flowers. So was that adequate?
Yeah, I think that would do it. Maybe sometimes when we're really focusing on trying to get flowers specifically, you would look to something maybe a little higher in that middle number.
In the middle number, yeah.
So some type of flowering fertilizer. And you can get them, of course, in all different formulations if you talk to your local nursery.
Yes, and I think I have lots of actually liquid that you can mix,
Now, the dogwoods are not in bloom yet. So are you?
They're starting. Yeah. I know 5 in my neighborhood.
Right.
And they're starting. Yeah. Yes, they're not in bloom, but their flowers are there. And mine do not have any.
Okay, you don't have any yet.
And even when the professional gardener was here last week digging up my perennial bed, he noticed that. He said, I don't think it's going to bloom this year, Donna. He said, it looks really healthy.
Yeah, well, that's a good sign.
It doesn't look like it's, yes, and that is a good sign. But anyhow, okay, I'm just disappointed. Maybe next year.
I know, yeah.
Okay, so that's that. Now, remember, my other question is about, it's the first time I've ever planted yellow beans. And they're in a veggie trough where I plant my peas and my Swiss chard and my kale and all that stuff. And I planted them all at the same time. And everything is, germinated, doing really, really well. But I haven't seen a sign of the yellow beans.
Okay.
I'm wondering, I planted them all about 3 weeks ago. Was it too cold?
Yeah, I think so. They need a lot of heat. I have a bunch of beans planted right now. None of mine are up either.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just the temperature, honestly.
Okay, so just leave them be, and eventually, with all this heat, they should start to be, popping their little heads up.
Yes, that's right. But you can also succession plant beans, so it doesn't hurt to plant them again.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll do that with one row then.
I've read
Let's see.
about that. Like a lot of times people plant beans every week, so you got a continual harvest through the summer because once
Okay.
they kind of peter out once they do their thing and,
Oh,
and you
yes, once
harvest
they're
them a
done.
bit.
Yeah. Same
Yeah.
as the peas. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, gentlemen. Well, I thank you so kindly for your help, and have a great day. And isn't it wonderful weather?
Oh,
Aren't we blessed?
This is the best spring we've had in a long time.
Ever. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, Donna.
Thank you, Donna. Okay, let's go to Yvadi, who's phoning from Glovertown. Thanks for joining us on the show. Thanks for waiting.
Hello.
Hi, do you have a question for the gardening experts today?
Yeah. I'm wondering, it's too late to put the carrot because in January we have a storm. So in my garden went like very white out. So I had to repair all those beds. So yesterday I just started put carrot and beet and beans and peas. So I wonder it's too late. And another good idea which I get in my garden is I bought a lot of flower and then I hang in my greenhouse. So I want bee come in my greenhouse and help pollinate with my tomato. And I put some seed, lettuce seed earlier. So now I can eat my lettuce for salad every day. And then later I will put outside in the garden.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, it's too late to put carrot?
No, it's not too late to put carrots. Some people suggest wait until the end of June because there's a rust fly that comes and actually hurts the carrots. So, yeah, there's lots of time left to plant carrots and other root crops, beets, and anything like that you want to plant.
Okay, that's good idea because last year I did late too, and I get a lot, many carrots. Usually I had like a few, but now I get smarter every year, so I put carrots in the middle of June. So, okay, that's good. Thank you.
That's great, Yvadi. And, the other thing to remember, too, about Newfoundland is that our summers, aside from this year, are usually late to warm up. But what's nice about our season, I guess one of the nice things is that we usually have a warm fall, and so we have a long growing season on the other side. So we sometimes tend to be in a rush to get things in the spring and feel like we're behind, but not realizing that all of September is usually good to grow as well, and some years even into October, depending on the weather. And in terms of your the other things you mentioned, Yvadi, you've got lots of flowering plants in the greenhouse. So you're trying to encourage bees inside the greenhouse to pollinate tomatoes and that sort of thing. And you don't have to have pollinators in the greenhouse that pollinate tomatoes. Tomatoes are self-pollinating, but they do benefit from just some air movement in the greenhouse. So just keeping the doors open on warm days is enough to kind of blow around that pollen from flower to flower. I know some people who actually even have a bit of fun with it with an electric toothbrush and just actually go out there and turn the toothbrush on and just touch the stem of the tomato, and it causes the plants to vibrate, and then it just releases the pollen. Yeah.
That's a form of air circulation.
Yeah, exactly.
In
Yeah.
its own little way.
Yeah.
Huh.
And the other thing Yvadi mentioned, which I think is great, is that she's grown some lettuce that she's already eating. So she's because she has a greenhouse, she's able to start those things. And that's one of the benefits of having a greenhouse is that you can extend the season a little bit for some of those things. So she started her lettuce a good while ago, and now she's eating it in the greenhouse. But then she's also got other plants ready to go outside in the next few days now that we know that we're past danger of frost and things are warming up. So she's really smart about having almost like the last caller, and Josh was talking about the successional planting, where you can have different times where you can harvest the same plant. Because often in gardening, you grow, let's say, a particular crop with, let's say, tomatoes, since how we were just talking about it. And you're waiting for that first tomato, and you're waiting for that first tomato, and you can't wait for that first tomato. And then all of a sudden you have more tomatoes than you can ever eat, and you're finding places to take them. So if you can kind of spread that harvest out a little bit and like sort of time your planting so that you have fruiting things or or leafy things like vegetables or whatever it is, that they're all being harvested at a successional rate. That's really beneficial. You can't do that for some things like potatoes and the root vegetables and things like that. They just need the whole season to grow. But for some of these other faster growing plants, you could certainly do that.
Do a little stagger.
Yeah, exactly.
As you go.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for the call, Yvadi. Okay, so far we've talked tomatoes, carrots, dogwood trees, lilac, nuisance vines. We covered that as well. Let's see what's next. Shannon is on the line from Middle Cove. Hi, thanks for calling.
Hi, thank you. I have a question about strawberries. I planted some strawberry plants about 3 springs ago. They've grown pretty well all along, but for some reason this year, none of them have come back, the mother plants. I let some daughter plants go last year with the intention of trying to propagate them and move them to some other areas, but most of the mother plants have not survived. I'm just wondering if it's a normal thing or if I had something weird happen.
Yeah, it does sound like something might have happened there. Strawberries, for the most part, like the mother plant should stay alive. And, when you see rows of strawberries, they kind of just get overgrown, but they don't die off in the middle. Like, they generally kind of mound up and get bigger as they go. So did you take the baby plants off the mothers and plant them somewhere else? Or did you notice that the mother plant died and that the babies are still alive, like attached to the dead mother plant?
Attached to the dead mother plant.
Huh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now I was wondering too, there's definitely less daughter plants than I had seen in the fall, but I have moose around. And I was thinking, would moose go after strawberry plants? I didn't think they would, but...
Yeah. I mean, you would see that. You would see the remnants of moose. Are pretty. They're not tidy eaters, so you'd have tracks around. You'd have probably gouges in the soil where they pulled up a plant. Because they kind of rip things out of the ground as opposed to like bite it off like a rabbit does, for instance.
That's what I say. Yeah, because they're planted around my fruit trees in the space between fruit trees. I had a few rows and. They did a good job on the fruit trees.
Shannon, so I guess the in terms of your strawberries, so there's no doubt that the main strawberry plant does get weakened over time because they just get old, and usually people who grow strawberries successfully do kind of replant them a bit more often. And so yours have been there for, 4 or 5 years, did you say?
No, this would have been their 4th year now.
Their 4th year now, yeah. So they probably would have benefited from maybe divided and replanted and kind of separated and, lined back out again maybe in their 3rd year, certainly after a couple of years of good growth. And then maybe the 3rd year you could think about doing that.
Okay.
But, yeah. And you said they're growing amongst your fruit trees. Is there any kind of, is it nice loose soil, do you think? Or is there some kind of competition between the fruit tree roots and your strawberry plants?
No, I dug a fairly large trench. I have a small Kubota, and it was a substantial dig when I did it to put them in, knowing that that's what I should do.
Right.
And I kind of built it up with some wood in the base, lots of good compost, some of the original soil.
Right.
Good mix of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So the only recommendation, I guess, at this point would be to get rid of those dead centers and replant some of the smaller ones if you haven't already done that. And at the same time, it's not a bad idea once in a while to replenish your strawberries with some brand new plants from a new supplier. It just helps to invigorate the crop and bring some kind of, new strong life back into your strawberry crop, because it's not uncommon for them to kind of weaken over time.
Okay. And it's not too late, let's say, to transplant the daughter plants?
No, not at all. No.
Okay.
Yeah, and when you do, though, at the same time, if you're not going to pull them up, right, you're going to kind of, because
work them up.
Yeah,
with
exactly.
A spade or something.
With a spade, yeah. Take some soil with those roots. If they're still attached, there's usually a little thread-like attachment. Just snip that off, and with a nice hand spade, just take up a nice scoop of soil and root at the same time, and get it right into its new spot, and water it well, a little bit of fertilizer, all the good stuff.
My thought actually was to set up. I found that in and around I call it the orchards. I'm having a lot of competition with just grasses and things, and difficult to keep it. I was going to move the strawberries. Would it be better to leave them until I have the new space ready? Or my thought was to dig them now, the daughters, and put them in pots and keep them in pots for the next, well, probably, hopefully, a few weeks, and then move them into the new space when I have it ready.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes you got to do that depending on what your work plan is. Ideally, it would be better to, get them into their new soil now and get them prepared and do what they need. And that because it's early in the season, and they'll benefit from not doing that when there's more leaves to support. Because when the older or the longer into the season a perennial plant is growing, the more leaves that it's producing. It'll probably start to flower soon, and then it becomes a more difficult time to transplant because the plant is needing more from its root system, and you're disturbing it at that critical time. So if you know that you're going to be doing that renovation, then that seems to be your only choice, is to take them up now, put them in pots, and then replant them. As opposed to wait for another 2 or 3 weeks to dig them up when you're doing your renovation. That would be more of a shock to the plant.
Right, and when I plant them, I guess if I do that with pots, can I just basically take up? I have a bunch of small pots. Just take it right out of the pot and put it in.
Yeah. Then you're just gently transplanting, and it's not near as much of a shock than if you were digging them out of the soil and like tearing roots and that sort of thing, because that kind of happens when you transplant something. But in this case, you're just popping it out of the pot and right into the ground again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, Shannon. Thanks
Thank you
for the
very
call.
much.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is The Signal on CBC Radio 1. You might also be listening on your CBC Listen app. I'm Jamie Fitzpatrick. I'm sitting in this week for Adam Walsh. This is Gardening Day with Josh Elyk and Tim Walsh from the MUN Botanical Garden. Our lines are open at 709-722-7111, or you can email The Signal at cbc.ca. And we do have some emails to catch up on. Questions about trees, it looks like, in the first couple. This one is from Joanna in Torbay. 2 years ago, we bought 2 cherry trees, but one didn't make it through the first winter, or so I thought. I didn't get around to pulling out the dead tree, and now this spring, lo and behold, I have 2 very strong shoots coming out of the ground. Will they amount to anything? So who wants to be the optimist or the pessimist on this one? Josh?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, because cherry trees and all fruit trees basically that you buy in the nurseries are grafted. So what happened probably is the top of the tree died, so that would be the top of the graft, which is the tree that you actually want with like the type of cherries that you bought. But what you're getting now, those sprouts or shoots coming from the ground, is actually the root stock. So it's a vigorous type of fruit tree related to a cherry. It might not even be a cherry. And they grafted the cherry onto that. So that's growing vigorously because that's what it does as a root stock. But when it comes to maturity, it's probably not going to be what you expect or something that you can even eat.
Yeah.
That wasn't the surprise I expected. It could be what's behind door number 3.
Exactly. Yeah. And what Josh, just explain the process of grafting.
So grafting's basically when you take 2 different trees that are related. So you could take, actually it doesn't have to be trees. You could take a potato and a tomato plant, and you could take the bottom of the plant from the potato and the top of the plant from the tomato. So you've cut them both in half, and you kind of like Frankenstein's monster, join them together. And if it's done properly, it will grow together and become one plant. And so that's actually what's done with every apple tree that's in an orchard or if you buy it. And that's why some of these trees are so expensive, because if you were to just take a cutting of an apple tree and you had just that apple tree and put it in the ground, it wouldn't grow as vigorously. And in fact, grapevines, all the grapes that are grown in Canada, like European varieties of grapes, when they first tried to bring them over, they wouldn't grow here because there was a certain insect that was overwintering inside of the grapevine. Then they started grafting the European varieties onto North American wild grapevines, and they could suddenly grow those varieties of grapes here because the rootstock had actually evolved with the insect that was here to be able to live and not succumb to the diseases that came vectored through the insects. So basically, grafting is something that we need to do to grow different varieties of trees here. And the suckers that come from the bottom of that graft are not usually what you want to grow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good explanation. Yeah, and that's what's happening here. It sounds like so the top has died.
Yep.
The fruit tree that she planted and wanted to fruit, that's died, and what's now growing is the rootstock, and the rootstock is not the plant that she would want. And as Josh said, it may not even be a fruiting tree at all. It may be. It's related because it has to be related in order for it to work.
For the grafting to
it's
to
like
take,
that's why potatoes and tomatoes work because they're in the same plant family. But yeah, so I would say for the caller or the person on the line there that if they want that fruit tree, that they need to basically get rid of what's coming up and replant, unfortunately,
and go from square one.
But at the same time, I would not necessarily replant unless they know that there was not some other reason why it didn't survive. And if they were to plant the same plant, are they going to have the same problem again? So is it, are they in Torbay, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah. So Torbay is coastal, and it might be that it's maybe exposed to some really strong northerly winds in the middle of winter, and it's really challenging on plants that are not from here.
Yeah, so it could be a location
it could be something
issue.
like that, right?
Because she did say she bought 2 cherry trees, so presumably one of them's doing fine.
Right.
So it might well be just
Yeah,
sometimes
could be
a few yards is enough to make a
Absolutely.
difference.
Yeah.
One
little
could be
windbreak.
around the corner of the
Right.
house or something. Yeah.
Yeah, a windbreak, a little microclimate of some sort. Yeah,
Right. Okay.
yeah. So
All right, let's go to the next email. This one's from Valerie, although we don't know where she lives. What can I do about my 40-foot-high pine tree that is slanting more every year, otherwise looks very healthy? Slanting trees are hardly unusual.
it's called a tuckamore in Newfoundland. Josh, what do you think?
40-foot-high pine tree, she says.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it kind of depends. Is it leaning in towards your house? Or
Yeah,
is it
that's
leaning,
right, yeah.
leaning in a field? Like any tree can be pruned. So even though it's 40 feet, and if you wanted to keep the tree, an arborist or someone qualified could climb up and, take a section off the tree that's causing it to lean. It could be leaning from prevailing winds, and it could be natural, like Tim was saying, alluding with the tuckamore tree. So it really depends. If it's a natural thing, the tree is going to grow itself straight. Like it might not look straight, but if it's bending from the wind, it's going to compensate for that and be strong. But if it's leaning from something else, like soil erosion or some other kind of maybe a man-made issue or some other kind of environmental factor, then it may need to be topped a little bit, cut back, or just removed.
Yeah.
Right.
At 40 years, it's a tough one, though. Those corrections are better made if it's happening when the tree's younger. And sometimes you can see it, and maybe for some reason, we don't see it until it's the tree's much older, because when it's younger, there's an opportunity to kind of get in there and loosen up the soil a little bit and maybe straighten it up, and with some supports and some strong wires and things of that nature, you can actually hold it upright until the tree develops a nice strong root system, and then you can let go of that support and the tree will remain upright. But as Josh said, if it's a result of soil erosion and all of a sudden the tree's losing its grip on the soil, and then the strong wind, prevailing wind that pushes it in that direction, and that's been happening for a super long period of time, that it's a really difficult thing to correct, because especially pine trees and the conifers, they don't look good when they're bent like that.
True.
Unless it's a bonsai in a nice little pot. So it is a bit of a challenge. And as Josh already said, you can do some pruning to remove some of the weight of the canopy, so that at least then it's not subject to the pressures of the wind. And what Josh said initially is, like, where is it leaning? If it's leaning towards your house, then it's more now a liability, and you may have to actually do something. Like you may actually have to take the tree out if there's a concern that it might fall on your house or on a neighbor's house or something like that.
Sure.
So certainly a few things to consider there. But it is a bit of a challenge after 40 years to straighten up a mature evergreen tree. Yeah.
I have a feeling you've gotten this next question before, either on this show or at work or both. Don from Salmon Cove, weeds, he writes, with 3 exclamation marks. Specifically, he says, how do we get rid of Japanese knotweed?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have had that call a few times. And we get at the Botanical Garden, it's one of those, it's a common problem.
Right.
Japanese knotweed, September mist, it's sometimes called mile-a-minute. And it's a European weed that is, or a Japanese weed that has been in North America for quite some time now. And it's establishing in built areas generally. It's not usually a problem in wild areas, so it doesn't tend to compete much with our native vegetation. So yes, somebody's listening to this and saying, "Well, I see it by the side of the highway or whatever, and it's pushing up against the forest," and it probably is, but it doesn't go deep into the forest because it likes to be out into the full sun. But it's got a really aggressive root system, and that's part of the challenge. And it grows super tall, looks almost like bamboo stems, and a big broad leaf. And that leaf shades out any sunshine from getting to the soil underneath it, so it makes it difficult for any other plant to compete with it. And we actually last year, Josh and I took over a huge piece of land in the Botanical Garden nursery. That had this Japanese knotweed, and we physically got in there. Remember that, Josh? It was actually Josh. What he didn't say earlier, I don't know if he did, but he's been with the Botanical Garden for just about a year now, and I think that was like within the first month. So
it was definitely one of the first jobs. Yeah,
I don't know what kind of message I was trying to send him. I figured if he'd survive this, then he'll survive anything.
Yeah, you never know what you're in for once you join this team. Yeah.
But we spent a full week in this one area just getting in there, digging it out, and we literally physically dug it out. And it came back, and so we've had to get in there and go at it again. And that's the only thing from a homeowner's perspective. There's only a few things you can do. You can dig it out. And
be prepared to dig it out again.
Yeah, and be prepared to dig it out again. Yeah, literally. And it will come back again because you will not get all of the roots because they're a little bit difficult to find every little piece of root. But when it comes back again, it's going to come back in a weakened state. And so if you're able to get out there then and get at it again and dig it out again, and eventually it will weaken and die. Oftentimes, it's a good idea to do it later. Like, I'm not saying don't do it now, but if you weaken the plant going into the winter, then it doesn't have that ability to like store a huge amount of energy into its root system, so that in the following spring when it comes back, it doesn't come back as strong as it would have in a normal year because you were working at it in the fall and you interfered with its ability to build up those winter stores. So that's one of the things to think about. But anytime you can cut it out, anytime you can get rid of those stems, you're reducing the strength of the root system. And then anytime you can dig it up, obviously that's the most effective. And then the final thing you can do, and not everybody's comfortable with this, but it is out there and there are herbicides there that are available. And if you're going to use herbicides, then find the one that's recommended for that and be sure that you use it incredibly safely, because herbicides, by their nature, they tend to be non-selective, which means that whatever that spray lands on will affect the plant. And of course, there's also physical, human concerns about using that as well.
Right.
So, but I have to mention it because it's out there, and it's available. You can go to, a store and buy a already mixed bottle of a non-selective herbicide. And so it's important to be very careful if you're going to do that. But I would leave that as a last resort. It wouldn't be my first choice. I would try and physically remove it.
Right.
Anything else, Josh, you might want to add to that?
I would just say, like, all of it was going to have to happen in multiple stages. So, like, even if you do get it to spraying, like Tim said, you're going to have to do it multiple times, and you're still going to have to dig it. And IPM with multiple approaches for that one for sure.
Yeah, it's a problem for a reason. It's a problem because it's an incredibly aggressive plant. And it's an incredibly adaptable plant that can grow in a wide variety of different soil types, a wide variety of sun exposures. and it really and it just spreads really quickly.
It sounds like as if it's restricted to one location on your property.
Yes.
You can play the long
Yeah.
game, dig
Yeah,
it out, put
exactly.
in the elbow grease time and time again, and weaken it over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is it about digging it out too. So it propagates by root division. So a piece the size of your fingernail will grow. So, and I'm guilty of doing this, and lots of people are guilty of doing this. Is if you dig it up and you're doing any work there, and you try to like level the ground later with a rake or anything, anywhere that you move the soil or rocks that were around it, it's going to push the plant around, and you won't notice until next spring.
Yeah.
And you'll think you did a good job and everything's cleaned up, and then you'll look back and you'll have patches of it or small little plants popping
Yeah.
up everywhere. So
Yeah.
be really
Okay.
careful with your compost.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm glad he knows what he's in for then, in
Yes.
that case. But there was an answer. It's
Yeah.
it's not the easiest answer. We'll go back to the phone lines now. George is on the line from Gander. Hello, thanks for joining us.
Hello, Jamie. Good to hear from you. A few questions for your two young fellows, dear, please.
Oh, young fellow, I like that, George.
First of all, a couple comments about the Japanese knotweed. I think I read once that the roots go down, I think it's 3 meters.
Well, I'm certainly not in Newfoundland because our soil is not that deep, but probably in areas where they have super deep soil, that wouldn't surprise me because it is a pretty aggressive plant. But that's not been our experience. When we dug it up last year, it was down, what would you say, probably 12, 14 inches, certainly, because this was nice loose soil we had it growing in. So
Yeah, at least. And then, but it did break off sometimes too, so
Yeah.
hard to say. But it'll start
Yeah.
to run laterally, like it'll go down vertically and then run. As soon as it hits anything hard, I'm sure it just starts to go horizontal.
Yeah, you're not stopping it.
Yeah, there's a few places in Gander, and it looks like there's a lot of different patches, and it looks like whether it's the seeds that's blown over from bird droppings or something, so it looked like it had spread to different places.
Yeah, and the other thing about that plant too is some people actually like it, and so that's the other side of it, and so and that's not wrong, I guess. We can't say that that a person should or shouldn't like something.
Yeah, they say when it's young, it's sort of like asparagus.
Yeah, well, it is edible. Yeah, and there are some foragers that actually harvest it in the very early stages in the early spring, just as those new shoots are just breaking the surface of the soil, or even just before they do, and they break off fairly easily. And yeah, I understand that you can eat that part and pickle them and a few things like that.
It actually has a chemical in it called resveratrol that's good for human health, and they make a pesticide from that plant family of plants.
Isn't that the same chemical nutrient that's in grapes?
Resveratrol? I think it is in, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it is in grapes as well.
Yeah, and red wine, I believe.
Yeah.
Last week somebody called in about growing apple seed, I think, and kind of suspected that they're going to get the same apple. Now, if you have like a Macintosh, isn't every Macintosh in the world taken off the cuttings from the original Macintosh that was named that variety?
Yes, so seeds, you're not going to get the true variety. Seed, you got like a 1 in, I'm not sure, we'll say 1 in 1,000 chance for sake of argument that it could be a Macintosh, but cuttings exactly is how you do it. And then, it might not be that exact same tree, but you take cuttings from the Macintosh tree, and then those cuttings, you take cuttings from, and then those cuttings, and then, that's right. So from seed, you may not even get anything with big apples. It might be like a tiny little crab apples that are not edible.
Mm-hmm. I always told people when they ask me about that, I always said that it's the same as human beings, and you have a male and female have children. They'll never be the same as the male or female. They're always going to be something different.
Exactly. Even twins are not perfectly the same.
Yeah, that's right.
What else you got for us, George?
I want to know if anybody, do you know where the Japanese beetle is and what areas has been confirmed? And then the same with the lily beetle. Do you know if any of these are in Gander or where they have been confirmed?
So the Department of Agriculture is the best one to ask for specifically where they are, but they're definitely in Newfoundland. We're considered, I think it's called a Category 2 now because they've been here long enough and there's so many of them here. And basically, you can call them to see if they're in your area, and if you do find them, you're supposed to capture it and report it right away, and then you can kill any other ones you see, but yeah.
Yeah, the departments are really interested in where it's being discovered. And this is the Japanese beetle. And actually, Josh and I sat in on a meeting on that very topic a couple of weeks ago. with representatives all across the country. And they've had some really good success actually out in BC in terms of controlling it. But it is moving around, and it's a very voracious herbivore that basically feeds on. I think its palate is like over 300 different varieties of plants, and but it includes, like for us, the danger of it is it includes a lot of vegetables that are grown here. Strawberries, for instance. We just talked strawberries earlier with a caller. They even eat blueberries. So, we don't want that out into the population's getting high. So that's why it's really important to report any sightings of it so that the departments can actually, target them and know what the distribution of the insect.
Well, thank you kindly, and happy gardening, everyone.
Thanks, George. And in terms of the lily beetle, that's a bit more widespread. Lily beetles have come in on infected nursery stock, obviously, and it's not uncommon for, when you're an island, things, if they get in one way or the other. And if it's something, for instance, that's a bother for lumber, then it usually comes in on a piece of lumber. Or if it's something that's a plant, it usually comes in on a piece of a plant or whatever. And so the lily beetles are actually kind of almost common now. We hear about them all the time, and those are these red. I think they're commonly called a scarlet lily beetle, and they really only feed on lily plants. So they don't. So, and it has to be a true lily. So it would feed on the oriental lilies and the trumpet lilies and the martagon lilies, and also it feeds on fritillarias, which is a lily relative.
How about canna lilies?
Canna lilies, maybe. I'm not sure. Is a canna lily an actual real lily? I'm not sure, because it has to be from the actual lily family. They're attracted to plants, because daylilies are not true lilies. It's that challenge with common names versus proper scientific names. The daylily is actually of the genus Hemerocallis, where other lilies are actually of the genus Lilium. So the insect targets true lilies, and really, I know lots of gardeners who are out there trying to protect their lilies all the time, and they're literally picking them off and just squashing them. And
the canna lily is from a rhizome, so it's probably a different family.
Right, it could very well be. Yeah.
Well, thank you very kindly.
Yeah. Okay, George.
Have a good day.
All right, you too.
All right. That's George in Gander. Good to hear from him. Kevin is on the line from Middle Cove. Hi, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. What's on your mind with regards to your garden today?
Well, it's not my garden, it's my birch trees. I'm just wondering if there's a bark treatment for birch leaf miner. Like they're really chewing at the birch trees there today.
Yeah, and that's a big challenge. Birches are big trees. Unfortunately, there isn't too much for the homeowner to have in their toolbox for that. Leaf miners, by their very title, they actually mine the flesh between the upper and lower outer covering of the leaf. So the skin of the leaf, basically. If you think about the leaf as having a skin on the top part and then the bottom part, and then all the liquid and all the nutrients that flow in between those two layers are encapsulated in a leaf. A leaf miner is a tiny little insect that actually lives inside of that layer. So you can imagine how small it is. And it mines.
That's where the name comes from. It's literally a miner. It goes underground.
Yeah. And it snakes itself around inside the leaf and feeds on the flesh. The challenge with controlling something like that is that it's protected by the leaf. And so in terms of topical applications that you can put on there, there's nothing, because it's not going to affect the insect because the insect is inside the leaf.
And so how does it travel? It travels up the bark, on the surface of the bark or beneath the bark?
I think it travels. I think it overwinters in the soil. So the eggs are overwintered in the soil, and then in the spring it then emerges and then makes its way up the tree. And so once it's into the trees, there used to be, for the homeowner, a lot more options, but that wasn't necessarily the best case either, because a lot of those, I'm talking chemical options, because oftentimes those chemicals were actually quite dangerous, and people unfortunately were not really aware of how dangerous it was to be handling these. And so now those applications are left to professionals who have all the right equipment and do it at all the right time and all the right rates. So my suggestion is that you contact an arborist or a nursery that specializes in these types of challenges, and they may be able to have what's called a systemic insecticide. And how systemic insecticides work is that by their name, they actually absorb it into the whole, it gets taken up by the whole plant, into the whole system, and it travels through the plant. And then as the leaf miner feeds on the flesh, then it feeds on this control, and it takes care of them.
So that's to the base of the bark.
Yeah, but that's not something that you would be able to purchase or apply yourself.
I saw something just recently online that I could purchase for elm tree leaf miner. Would that be the same?
Well, I wouldn't be able to say, because insecticides are registered by the department of one of the government departments. I think it's environment, maybe, or
agriculture.
Or agriculture, yeah.
And they're labeled specific.
And they're label specific, and there's laws around how they're used. And if it's not registered for use on, for instance, in this case, a birch, then it's legally not allowed to be used on it. So I'd be very careful purchasing chemicals online, because for that reason you may actually be doing maybe breaking a law, not realize it, but also you may be running the risk of chemical exposure to yourself, to your neighbors, to animals, to whatever, if it's not used properly.
Or increasing resistance.
Yeah, or increasing resistance. That's right. Yeah.
So they drop to the ground at a certain time. Do they, once they're feeding and once they grow? Is that how they work?
I'm not sure if they're a flying insect or if they're.
Well, I mean, dropping on a string or on a thread,
No, not leaf miners. That would be leaf rollers, probably.
Okay.
Leaf miners wouldn't drop on a thread. So usually, when you have something that's dropping on a thread, it's a caterpillar of some sort, and the caterpillar.
So how do they get back into the soil after they're up in the tree?
Pardon me?
How do they get back into the eggs or whatever? Get back into the soil
when the leaves fall in the fall. The leaves fall off the tree, and then they would probably drop off the leaves in the soil. I'm not sure about the whole life cycle, but yeah, if they're leaf miners, then in the fall the leaves fall off the tree.
So if I put a tarp on the ground.
Cleaning up your leaf litter could help break the life cycle. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Like when you look at IPM and you're trying to interrupt the life cycle of an insect, so you look at the leaves dropping down, cleaning up that leaf litter is definitely going to reduce your insect population.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
So there's nothing I can apply as a homeowner.
Maybe horticulture dormant oils on the leaves, and nothing that's going to knock them back in any significant amount that they'd like to see. Yeah, there's not any great chemical options like that I'm aware of.
Yeah, and it's strange because I've got like half a dozen or more birch on one side of my property. They're probably 20, 25 feet high. And on the opposite side of the property, I got the same amount, but on the opposite side of the property, I got no problem.
Is there a lot of sun on one side and no sun on the other?
There's more sun on the side where I got the problem.
Yeah, so it could just be simple as that, like environmental. Some trees love full sun, some don't. And it's funny though that birch would be doing a bit better in the shade, but if it's a lot of sun, yeah.
Yeah, but maybe I think it's difficult to say for sure what the best solution for you is. I think you should think about maybe contacting an arborist who's got some of those tools that we mentioned earlier. But the raking up the leaf litter would be certainly a good idea. And of course, that's not something you need to do right now because they're already emerged now if they're relying on the leaves that are on the ground from last year. But it's something to think about going forward for sure.
Kevin, we'll have to leave it there because we're just about at the end of the show. Thanks so much for chiming in.
Okay, thanks for the information. I appreciate it.
And that will put a wrap on it. The hour flies by quickly.
Wow, does it
when
ever?
we talk gardening. Mm-hmm. Any last thoughts from either of you guys? I'll give you 30 seconds. I know that you're not short-winded when it comes to gardening.
No, I mean, it's a great season. I think that's the message that, well, everybody knows it anyways. It's one of the better springs I think we've had in quite a long time. The Botanical Garden is just hopping. There's so many people coming up to visit. We had an incredible Friends of the Garden plant sale just last weekend, and very successful. We saw lots of new gardeners and lots of old gardeners. And lots of events happening at the Botanical Garden for sure. So check us out online. Lots of information there.
Josh, we have less than a minute.
No, not much to say. Thanks for having me.
By, yeah.
I hope everyone's enjoying the good weather and get out in your gardens.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, good
hope
advice.
we can hear from you both again real soon.
Oh, I hope so too. Thank you, Jamie.
That's it for today's folks. I'm Jamie Fitzpatrick sitting in for Adam Walsh. He's the usual voice. Don't worry, he'll be back next week. If you missed any of this conversation, you want to go back and double check anything that you heard, each episode of The Signal is available on the CBC Listen app or on the CBC Newfoundland and Labrador YouTube channel. I'm Jamie Fitzpatrick. I think I already said that part. Thanks for joining us today. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.